The rain fell in icy sheets that November morning, washing away the last traces of warmth from the abandoned lot on the city's forgotten edge. Through the downpour, something caught Melissa Sanders' eye, not garbage, as she first thought, but a living creature, a German shepherd, once majestic, now reduced to skin and bones. Chained so tightly to a rusted pole that her collar had begun to embed into her flesh, the dog's matted fur hung in filthy clumps, caked with months of dirt and waste. Yet it was her eyes that stopped Melissa, cold-clouded with infection, but hauntingly alert, holding a depth of suffering that seemed almost human. Melissa's breath caught in her throat as their gazes locked across the rain-soaked lot. In that moment, something profound and unspoken passed between them. This wasn't just another stray. This dog had been deliberately left here to die, a living testament to humanity's capacity for cruelty. The bus that would take Melissa to her job at the downtown veterinary clinic passed by. She didn't even look up. "I'm going to help you," she whispered, rain mixing with the tears on her face. "I promise." The rescue team arrived within 30 minutes. Dr. Richards, the clinic owner, had come himself after hearing Melissa's description. Even these seasoned professionals fell silent at the sight before them. "This is beyond neglect," Dr. Richards said, his voice tight with anger. "This is deliberate torture." The heavy chain was secured with an industrial padlock to a collar that had become partially embedded as the dog had grown. Nearby, a filthy bowl held stagnant rainwater, her only source of hydration. The circular path worn into the mud around the pole told its own story of endless, hopeless pacing. As they approached with bold cutters, the German shepherd made no attempt to flee or fight. Perhaps she lacked the strength, or perhaps some ember of hope still flickered within her. Recognizing this as her salvation, when the chain finally fell away, the dog's eyes found Melissa's again. "We'll call her Hope, Doctor," Richard suggested as they carefully loaded her into the transport crate. Melissa shook her head, still locked in that profound gaze. "No, her name is Duchess. I don't know why, but it's her name. She's not what they made her, she's who she was meant to be." What Melissa couldn't know then was that cutting away the chain was just the beginning. The true bonds that held Duchess captive ran far deeper, and breaking them would require a courage that would change both their lives forever. At the clinic, the full horror of Duchess's condition became clear. Beneath the matted fur, her body was a map of suffering, every rib visible, hip bones jutting sharply against her skin. Pressure sores marked where she had lain on hard ground for months. Her paw pads were raw from standing on the same small patch of dirt. Most disturbing was her neck, where the collar had become partially embedded as she grew. "I'm amazed she's still alive," Dr. Richards said quietly, reviewing her blood work. "Severe malnutrition, dehydration, multiple infections, anemia, heartworm positive, the list goes on." They worked through the night, first sedating Duchess to shave away the matted fur and treat her most urgent wounds. As layers of filth were removed, glimpses of the dog she once was began to emerge, a purebred German shepherd with distinctive markings, probably around 3 years old. "She must have been quite beautiful once," observed Dr. Matthews, the senior veterinarian, "and will be again," Melissa said with unexpected fierceness. "I'll foster her." The statement surprised even herself. Melissa lived in a small apartment that didn't allow pets, worked long hours, and had never owned a dog. Yet something about Duchess had awakened a protective instinct so powerful it overrode all practical considerations. "This dog needs months of rehabilitation," Dr. Richards cautioned. "Not just medical, but behavioral. We have no idea what she's been through." "I'll figure it out," Melissa said, her eyes never leaving Duchess's sleeping form. "I can't explain it, but I need to do this. She needs me." The first weeks were the hardest, through a miracle of compassion. Laura Chen, a clinic client who had recently lost her elderly golden retriever, offered her home as a recovery space for Duchess. with a fenced yard and Laura working from home. It was the perfect environment for a traumatized dog. Duchess spent those first days pressed into the corner of the spare bedroom, back against the wall, watching. She accepted food and medication, but remained disconnected, present in body, but absent in spirit. The German shepherd flinched at sudden movements and kept her distance, her eyes constantly alert for danger. Melissa visited daily after her shifts at the clinic, sitting quietly on the floor, reading aloud in a soft voice. The behavioral consultant had suggested the sound of a calm human voice could help rebuild positive associations without pressure. Progress comes in whispers with these cases, Dr. Matthews had advised. Don't expect leaps on the 5th day. Laura sent Melissa a photo that brought tears to her eyes, Duchess still in her corner. But with her head resting on the edge of the dog bed Laura had placed nearby, the smallest possible venture beyond her self-imposed boundary. It's happening, Melissa whispered to herself, adding the image to her growing collection. Each tiny step forward felt like climbing a mountain. The first real breakthrough came at the 3-week mark. Melissa was sitting on the floor near Duchess's bed, reading as usual, when she felt the lightest touch against her hand. Duchess had extended her neck forward to delicately sniff Melissa's fingers. The contact lasted less than 2 seconds before she retreated. But it was deliberate, an intentional choice to investigate rather than withdraw. Melissa maintained her calm exterior, continuing to read for another 10 minutes before making her unhurried departure. Only in her car did she finally allow herself to cry tears of privilege at witnessing such profound courage. This creature, who had every reason to reject human contact forever, was somehow finding the strength to reach beyond her trauma. As the weeks passed, Duchess's physical transformation began to mirror her emotional one. With proper nutrition, her ribs became less prominent, her coat growing in with surprising luster. The surgical wound on her neck healed cleanly, leaving only a small patch of white fur marking where the embedded collar had been removed. Most remarkable was the emergence of her true nature, far from the cowering, broken creature they had found. Duchess revealed herself to be intelligent, gentle, and surprisingly resilient. She began to respond to simple verbal cues, making eye contact for longer periods, and even on the 7th week, wagging her tail when Melissa arrived. The first time Duchess voluntarily placed her head in Melissa's lap was captured on video, a quiet moment that spoke volumes about the journey they had traveled together. Melissa had been documenting the recovery primarily for the clinic's records and shared this particular clip on her private social media for her friends following the rescue story. Within 24 hours, the video had been viewed over 100,000 times. Something about that moment a formerly abused dog choosing to trust again resonated deeply with people. Comments poured in by the thousands, many sharing their own rescue stories, others simply expressing emotion. Local news picked up the story, interviewing Melissa and Laura about Duchess's journey. The resulting segment caught the attention of a national morning show, featuring Duchess's transformation as part of their Heroes Among Us series. Suddenly, the quiet rehabilitation became a public journey. We never expected this attention, Melissa explained during one interview. But if Duchess's story helps other animals in similar situations, then something meaningful comes from her suffering. 6 months after her rescue, Duchess had completed her medical treatments and transformed into a stunning example of her breed. Only the small patch of white fur on her neck remained as evidence of her traumatic past. But the true miracle was unfolding in ways no one could have predicted. Dr. Carter, the behavioral veterinarian consulting on Duchess's case, was the first to notice it. She has an unusual level of empathy, he observed during a follow-up evaluation. Watch how she responds to emotional cues rather than just physical ones. Duchess showed an almost uncanny awareness of Melissa's emotional states, positioning herself as physical support when Melissa was tired, placing her head gently in her lap during moments of stress, even anticipating anxiety before Melissa herself was fully aware of it. Many dogs are intuitive, Dr. Carter explained. But Duchess seems to have developed something deeper through her own trauma-heightened sensitivity to suffering in others. When Dr. Carter suggested evaluation for a therapy dog training, Melissa was skeptical. She's still recovering herself. Isn't that asking too much? Actually, it might be exactly what she needs, Dr. Carter replied. Many former rescue dogs thrive when given purpose, and Duchess shows natural empathy that can't be trained. To everyone's surprise except perhaps Dr. Carter's, Duchess demonstrated exceptional aptitude. She maintained calm focus in distracting environments, showed appropriate social behavior with strangers, and most importantly, displayed that natural empathy that made her connection with humans unique. She's reading human emotional states better than many dogs with no trauma history, the evaluator noted. It's as if her own experience has given her a sixth sense. The call from Children's Regional Hospital came 8 months after Duchess's rescue. The pediatric trauma unit was looking for a therapy dog with specific qualities to work with their most challenging cases, children who had experienced severe physical and emotional trauma. Duchess's first hospital visit was approached with careful preparation. But what happened astonished everyone present from the moment she entered the pediatric wing. She displayed an intuitive understanding of her purpose that transcended training. Most remarkable was her apparent ability to adjust her interaction style to each child's specific needs. With Emma, an energetic 6-year-old recovering from surgery, Duchess engaged playfully. But with Tyler, a withdrawn teenager with severe burns who had refused to engage with therapists, her approach transformed completely. She simply rested her head gently on his bed, maintaining calm eye contact until, remarkably, the boy reached out to touch her ear. She somehow knows exactly what each child needs, observed Dr. Patel, the hospital's integrative therapy director. It's beyond standard therapy dog training. She's not just sensing their emotional states, she's actively responding to unspoken needs. Most notable was Duchess's work with nonverbal children, where her capacity for a connection transcended the limitations of language. Parents reported that children who struggled to communicate with humans sometimes told things to Duchess, whispering into her attentive ears or demonstrating through touch what they couldn't express in words. The hospital began formally documenting Duchess's work, collaborating with researchers studying animal-assisted therapy. Preliminary findings suggested that her own trauma history might have created specialized neural pathways related to emotional detection and response, essentially a form of shared experience that facilitated deeper connection. The true extent of Duchess's extraordinary abilities became clear on a Tuesday afternoon, when a bus carrying children from a Special Olympics training event crashed on the highway. Multiple injuries and dozens of traumatized children were transported to hospitals, including the children's facility where Duchess regularly worked. They're asking if you and Duchess can come, Laura explained urgently. They're setting up a crisis response area for the children who aren't physically injured but are experiencing trauma reactions. The scene that greeted them at the hospital was overwhelming. Approximately 15 children with various special needs, all from the bus accident. Some were crying, others completely withdrawn. A few displayed repetitive self-soothing behaviors. The overwhelmed child psychologists and social workers were doing their best, but the collective trauma energy was palpable. Duchess paused at the threshold, her body language shifting into what Melissa now recognized as a working mode, alert but calm, fully present, and completely focused on the humans in distress. Without specific direction, she began moving through the room, approaching each child with careful consideration. What happened next would later be described by Dr. Patella's triage of the soul. Duchess moved first to those in most acute distress, offering grounding physical presence. With a boy who was hitting himself, she simply pressed her body against his legs until the repetitive motion ceased. For a girl silently crying in the corner, she placed her head gently in the child's lap. Perhaps most remarkable was her work with a severely autistic child who had retreated completely into himself. Duchess approached differently, not making direct contact, but positioning herself nearby, creating a sense of protective presence without intrusion. Gradually, the boy's rigid posture softened, his gaze eventually shifting to the patient shepherd waiting beside him. When he finally reached one hand to touch Duchess's ear, the social worker gasped. It was the first responsive action he'd shown since the accident. "She's doing what we can't," Dr. Patel whispered, creating safety that transcends verbal reassurance. For over 3 hours, Duchess worked with the traumatized children, while medical teams handled physical injuries. The German shepherd addressed wounds invisible but equally critical: fear, shock, and the disorientation of sudden trauma. Parents arriving were astonished by the transformation in their children. Those who had been unreachable were calm enough to communicate, whether through words, signs, or simply restored eye contact. 3 years after her rescue, Duchess sat regally beside Melissa during a ceremony in the town square, seemingly understanding the significance as the mayor unveiled a bronze statue commemorating her journey and impact. The life-sized sculpture depicted Duchess in her therapy pose, alert but calm, embodying the quiet strength that had become her hallmark. This monument stands not just for one dog's remarkable story, the mayor announced, but for the transformative power of compassion in our community and beyond. The Duchess Foundation had grown into a nationally recognized organization. The crisis response protocol developed around Duchess's work had been implemented by emergency services in 7 states, with demonstrable improvements in outcomes for trauma victims. More significant was the effect on animal welfare legislation. Duchess's law, recently passed by the state legislature, strengthened penalties for animal abandonment and mandated psychological evaluation for certain categories of animal cruelty. As the ceremony concluded, Melissa took a moment alone with Duchess in the quiet square. "Did you know this was in you all along?" she asked softly, scratching behind the shepherd's ears. This capacity to heal after being so broken, the most profound aspect of Duchess's work, had emerged over the past years. Her specific affinity for working with trauma survivors across populations, from veterans with PTSD to children recovering from abuse, Duchess showed an uncanny ability to connect with those whose experiences of violation and helplessness mirrored her own history. She creates a bridge across trauma. Dr. Landry, the psychologist heading the Foundation's clinical programs, had observed. Her presence communicates, "I know what darkness feels like, and I'm here with you in it." From Melissa, the journey with Duchess had catalyzed profound changes. She had left her veterinary technician position to work full-time with the Foundation, completing additional certification in animal-assisted therapy. The frightened dog she had impulsively committed to helping had become the center of a vocation she had never imagined. As the celebration continued, Melissa watched Duchess approaching a newcomer, a young woman in a wheelchair, recently referred to their program after an accident left her with both physical injuries and PTSD. The shepherd moved toward her with particular attentiveness, gently placing her head on the woman's lap in silent offer of connection. The moment captured everything that made Duchess extraordinary: her intuitive recognition of suffering, her willing engagement, and her generous offering of her own hard-won wholeness as a bridge to healing. From abandoned prisoner to princess to healer, Duchess had not just survived but transcended her ordeal, transforming the very chain that once bound her into connections of compassion that continued to expand with each life she touched. In the end, perhaps the greatest miracle was not that Duchess had been saved, but although she went on to save herself. This heart-touching journey reminds us that even from the darkest beginnings can come extraordinary light. Duchess's story shows us that our deepest wounds, when healed with love, can become our greatest gifts to others. If her journey moved you, please share it with someone who needs hope today.